Hello everyone and welcome back on the channel. I want to teach you how to play against Najdorf opening. You already have one extremely interesting line against Najdorf on this channel. It's Rook G1, sixth move. But I remember a few years ago, a good friend of mine, Grandmaster, asked me to teach one of his students my blitz specialty, sixth move, Queen F3. I don't know what's the name of this variation. I just know it as my old blitz specialty, and I just decided to surprise you and to show you something very interesting. And guess what? Against one of the most popular variations in Sicilian and one of the most solid openings with the black pieces against e4, Najdorf variation. So let's begin with the Queen F3 and let's get straight to the point. So what's the point of Queen F3? Nothing. First of all, I put my queen on this interesting square. In many of these variations, in many of these lines, I just want to support G4. That's the first thing. Second thing is I would like to go with Bishop E3 and long castle very fast, but I can go and I can make a long castle before I secure my queen on F3 and rook on D1 and prevent that bishop G4 threat. So in many of these lines, we'll have to play H3. As soon as they play E6, we go with G4 and we just push these pawns. Very important, before I just show you, is to tell you that in this lecture, I'm not just like in other lectures to give you lines, but I'll try to go in depth into these variations and to show you like the main ideas and plans. So this is going to be a true lecture, because much more important than just giving you these lines is just to give you an important ideas with the most important, like variations and novelties in some positions. So let's get started. After you play Queen F3, one of the most suspicious, but believe it or not, most common approaches by these Najdorf guys was E5. I'm willing to say that Queen F3 is aimed against E5. When you play like H3, one of the main moves is E5. When you play Bishop E3 English attack, main move is E5. When you play F3, main move is E5. When you play, lots of other things such as A4, Bishop E2 positional approach, all these moves, Najdorf players, they just meet by and with E5. That's why I'm of opinion that when you play Queen F3 so many times, you'll be able to face the following E5 approach. So what's the point after E5? Nothing. They just once again try to kick this knight away from the center, and you just play knight F5. I remember when I was younger, like 15 years ago, maybe even more, I played this variation against Jan Nepomniachtchi. And I remember I beat him with this knight F5 thing. He also played E5, even though I considered this variation to be pretty suspicious. So what's the point? After knight F5, they just have to go with either bishop F5 or knight C6. For example, whoever plays E5, they usually go with bishop F5. But bishop F5 is probably something that you can just dream about when you play this variation. If they play knight C6, now they threaten to take on F5 and to jump with this knight on D4, harassing queen and going after the C2 weakness. There is a very nice line, and line that gives you, for example, this is a very concrete thing. So you play bishop G5. What's the point? You pin this knight, you create pressure with the queen on F3, knight on F5, bishop G5, and at the same time you prevent, for the time being, knight D4 as long as you have this knight. That's why they have to get rid of it, but this time you don't take by queen, of course, because of knight D4, but you take by pawn. That's a specialty. You already have a nice control of the center, and you already have bishop pair. Here, bishop pair is not that important, but control of the light squares. So let me show you what's happening here. If they go with knight d4, you have a surprising queen takes b7. I remember many years ago I just analyzed this, and I came up with this interesting line. So if they go with a move like such as, for example, you threaten bishop f6, bishop a6, bishop e5. So when they go like rook b8, you take, they take, you just go king d2, and after knight a1, bishop b5 wins the game. How do you win the game? Okay, play king d2 or king d1. It's pretty much the same. I mean, king d1, knight a1, bishop b5, and if they go king e7, take a look at this nice mating picture, knight d5. So all your pieces, 3 minor pieces, are doing a great thing, and the king is mated on e7. If rook b5, you just take by queen, queen d7. You don't want to improve their king for the endgame, but play queen b8. Of course, spoil castle, play king d2, give up bishop, and now you have rook that supports both of these pawns, knight that controls both of these squares, bishop that cannot get so much active, and of course your up opponent, this is technically completely winning for white. Just like you see, after e takes f5, they can't play knight d4, simply it loses, and when they play bishop e7, you just go with very surprising bishop f6 and bishop d3. Bishop f6 because you just have like nice control of the light squares. Well, and definitely your light square bishop is better than their dark square bishop. From another point of view, any knight d4 is now useless because we can easily take on b7. Well, they can't do anything to our pawn on c2. And finally, when they play short castle, now you have a very sweet choice of between long and short castle. But in both cases, this is more like positional approach and more like a positional type of the game. Why do I say this? Because if you go with short castle, they go knight e7, you go bishop e4, you do not allow them to play d5, you threaten to take on b7, you play a4 to prevent b5, to stick your pawn on a5, to fix the weakness on b7, and after queen b6, a5, they can't take because you just trapped the queen, of course. So they gotta go with queen c5. You play rook to d1. They still cannot play d5. You play rook a4, controlling the fourth rank. Playing g3 to fight against any bishop g5 with h4, and also to be able to slowly prepare your king for middle game, or let's just say endgame afterwards. And after rook d7, knight e5, it's one of those typical opposite color bishops endgame, typical for Sicilian positions where white is just so much better, technically winning. So you cannot even imagine how many games. This is one correspondence game that I just showed you, but it's so nice, it's so logical, and every player who's actually familiar with this basic positional, rules of the game, he shouldn't have problems to reach something like this. From another point of view, you can play long castle as well. This is a little bit more aggressive approach, but basically idea is just the same. After knight e5, g3, you give up bishop for the knight, and now you're left strong knight against weaker bishop. After rook h2, e1, c3, queen to d3, f4. You don't have to play f4, but he did it because once he takes on f4, he would have a very sweet choice of taking by knight, which I wouldn't do, and taking, of course, on f6, which would be so much better in terms of endgame for white. And after queen c8, h4, if any e takes f4, g4 would happen, or first knight f6 and g4 with potential attack. All things considered, don't forget, let's make conclusion. After knight c6, you need to remember bishop g5. Here, after any bishop f5, e takes f5. It's everything what you have to know here, and already after 9 moves, you can easily say yourself, okay, Maya told us that we can breathe easier here because for sure white has between slightly and much better position. That's it, and that's enough. Another thing is if they take on f5. For example, I remember playing all those thousands of bullet games when I was younger, and when I went with this thing, and I won all my games with a very simple plan. I captured by queen, and when they play knight c6 to threat knight e4, I always defended this with the bishop on e3. Bishop on e3 defends knight e4 idea. And when they go with, for example, bishop e7 is normal for those who already played this bishop f5 idea. But let's say there were like so many guys playing like queen d7. When they play queen d7, you just take knight e7, long castles, bishop e7, put your king in safety, and play g4. What's the plan? You play g5. Why? To get some space. Why? To get like a nice diagonal h3 c8. Why? Because I would like to go g5 h4 bishop h3. So my light square bishop belongs on the diagonal h3 c8. What else? I'm controlling d-file. I got a bishop here. I have a nice control of the d5 square. White is practically positionally winning here. And you don't need to be Anatoly Karpov yourself to say, how am I supposed to play this position? Just practice a little bit, for example, with your friend, play a couple of games and try to feel like the energy of these positions for white. What's the point? The point is bishop here, control of the light squares, great outpost d5, open d-file, and inability by black players to even do something along the c-file, because once they play rook c8, you always have that lethal bishop h3 trick. And that's it. From another point of view, those who played bishop e7, I always, without any hesitation, went for castles and my favorite move g4. Why did I like it so much? Because I want to do g5. Why? Because I want to eventually get some sort of attack. Why? Because I like to go with h4. But now if you ask me, would I like to go with h5 and g6 to attack? Maybe. Why? Because maybe it's better to play g5 h4, and once you, when you can, place your light square bishop on h3. What's it so important? Because you're just taking away c8 square for the rook. So anytime they're just happy or they're trying to do some rook c8, they wouldn't be able to do it as long as we have that fantastic battery queen f5 bishop h3 on the diagonal. So that's important to remember, and that's the old rule of this line. You just play g5, you just play h4. How are you going to face all my threats? Impossible. You can't play queen a5. I'm gonna take the piece. Go home, baby. You can't go knight c5. I'm gonna take the piece. You can't go knight b6. I can even play bishop h3, threatening the exchange there and threatening some bishop here, knight d5 or knight d5 immediately, or so on. Or simply taking on b6, jumping d5. Or simply playing h5 followed by g6. So many things, and they can do it. From another point of view, they want to go rook e8 followed by knight f8. Be my guest. I'll play bishop h3. Now you can't go it because I'm going to win an exchange. You, I don't know, move the rook here. I don't care, I can play h5. You finally do it. Now I can jump here. Your rook is trapped. So many nice and easy traps. You just have to become familiar with these basic tricks and ideas. So all things considered, e5 followed by bishop f5 is something that we should be more than happy with in our games. It's not very likely for Najdorf guys, but turns out after all these years that one of the most interesting continuations by black is g6. I'm saying unlikely for Najdorf players that they will go with g6 and bishop g7 if they're Najdorf guys. But from another point of view, if they're just well prepared and booked up, you can expect this variation with g6. And you have to know a couple of interesting ideas here. You play h3, and h3 is important because I'm willing to go bishop e3 along castle, and they will never be able to go with bishop g4. After bishop g7, bishop e3, castle short, castle long. What I like about these positions is that we always play with the opposite side castles. It's nice if you like to attack. But from another point of view, it can be very tricky because there is always like a double-edged type of the game, and there is always that they can come up with something and do the counterattack. Simply get used to it and be ready for a very tough games. From another point of view, I really enjoy in my positions. I like them. Basically, I enjoy playing opposite side castles and attacking my opponents. But you also have to be ready to be under the attack and to also know like the main defensive ideas. So what is it all about this one? For example, they have bishop d7 and knight c6. Remember, a good friend of mine, and I am, actually best friend of mine, he played against German GM, and this German GM played knight c6. Most of players go with bishop d7. For some reason, they think that after knight c6, we can't play like this because after knight c6, e5 might be a threat. That's a wrong thing. My friend played this, so don't go with this. Looks like it's dangerous, but it's nothing. They just go knight e5. That's what the German player did. Knight e5, c takes d5, e takes d6, played rook b8, and all of a sudden, instead of he who should be the guy who's going to attack in this position, he was the one who was just defending, and he lost this game in a relatively easy fashion. Just like you see, Black really played well on top of his tactical task, and then he went queen a5, sacrificed and demolished White's position. What was his mistake? After knight c6, you shouldn't go with the most tempting knight takes c6 and d5, because you could have seen open b file was way better for some sort of exploitation for black pieces than for white. So what should you do? King b1. They go bishop d7 and the golden rule. What are they trying to do? They're trying to play rook c8, followed by knight e5, and to second exchange. Well, if black can do that in the dragon, while white has f3, g4, h4, h5, and all those typical attacking ideas, black is going to do it here as well. So all we have to do, we just have to be ready how to face this. And one of the most interesting ideas from my I played more than 500, 600, maybe even more games in these positions, I realized that we should be going with the knight on d5. So I don't want to give you b5, b4 with tempo. I don't want to give you knight e5, rook c8, and rook c3, a typical sack exchange, but I just insist on the move knight d5. What's so special about this knight on d5? First of all, if you take on d5, I would take. If you go and take everything, then you play a very bad version of the dragon without the dragon bishop, and I'm gonna definitely kick your ass on the king side by pushing this pawn up to h5, breaking and attacking on the dark squares, and I'm just so dangerous here. This is almost undefendable position. And after knight d5, knight e5 happen in most of these games, and then you take. I found this being played in a game of Judith Polgar against Sweerts, world junior champion, and another guy, one GM, Escobar, and game that took part in Cali in Colombia. So quite interesting name. Good player, Escobar, who played in Cali. Well, pretty funny one. After knight f6, bishop f6, played queen g3. Both played. Judith Polgar and Escobar guy. So what's the point? You're just getting ready for f4 and e5 with tempo because they're very annoying x-rays against the queen. If queen a5, trying to remove the queen, knight b3 saves the day. Why? Because you harass this queen with tempo, you open this rook, which is going to put some pressure against the bishop on d7, and you just want to go with f4 and d5 next. After queen c7, f4, kicking the knight away. And now we're going to see two games. First game was between Polgar and Sweerts, and another game was between this guy Escobar and Leva Rodriguez played like 9 years ago. So, in Judith Polgar's game, Black went for knight c6. Polgar went for h4. Rook f8, making some sort of pressure against the c2 pawn. c3, taking the last defensive measures before going for the action. h5, you don't want to allow me attack. Let me just go with bishop e2, threatening bishop h5. Bishop g7, you once again prevent all these kinds of threats, so let's go with queen f2. Clever move. I usually like when this battery happens in these positions. Threatens, very annoying, bishop b6. And Swords played a5, bishop b6, and now the queen was kind of misplaced there. And a very smart idea, he just wants to push a4 and a3 with tempo, which is going to give like a great activity to both rook a8 and bishop g7, and played a3. a4, knight d4, knight e4, bishop d4, e5 captured, bishop b6, and this basically kind of paralyzes all black pieces. Queen on b8 got stuck there. Rook on a8 is a pretty bad piece as well. Rook on c8 also not the most active piece. I don't see anything regarding the possible like attack by black in this position. Well, Judith Polgar threatens to win the bishop on the spot, and after bishop e6 she was the one who launched the attack with g4. A beautiful attack, a beautiful way of playing, and I gotta be honest and to say that I always enjoy in Judith Polgar's games because she had a very unique attacking style. And to be honest, nowadays when I watch all these young GMs, I simply don't see anyone who's gonna be even close similar to her and her pretty crazy and very attractive tactical style. So h5, g takes, rook h5, went for bishop a6. Can you imagine his desperation to play this? Rook g5, threatening queen f6, and when she did it, king a1, and Swords resigned. Beautiful game. Once again showed how fantastic Judith Polgar was. Probably this guy put his hopes into this, but then the cold-blooded checkmate reaction would happen. In another game that happened here, black played rook c8, threatened queen c2, followed by queen d1 mate. After queen f2, this is quite a nice thing. You can play knight g4. I'm creating a battery and defending the pawn on c2. Bishop h4. Now this guy, Escobar, played g3. Both of these pieces were hanging, and this is a very smart move. He doesn't care about this pawn, which definitely was taken. He now played queen g2. All the time he's gonna have some pressure against both the bishop and the knight, but more importantly, he managed to open the g file. After knight c4, captured, played rook to d4, and now took this piece on g3. Queen c2, and this was a relatively easy game by white. 23 moves and very easy win. So just when you see all these things, you're just wondering, so what should they play after knight c6, king b1, and this move knight d5? According to these databases, not queen a5, but they should be going with rook c8. You play f4, they just jump here. You play e5, and you play rook h3-1. This happened in a game of a really strong correspondence players, both around 2500. In correspondence, chess is really a lot, and they really play strong moves. Just like you see, I would be more than happy to get a game with two rooks on these open files, with the knight and the bishop and queen being supported, with this e5 break in the center. White really looks great in this position, and you simply have to admit that. We've seen e5 and we've seen g6. Let me just show you one more. By the way, any queen b6, I'll show you a little bit later when they play first e6 and then queen b6. You always put your knight back on b3. Don't forget about that. If they go with knight c6, Knight c6 is a move that is not that good for black, but it used to be done against me. And here I have a very special variation. It's a forced line. You take on c6 and push your pawn up to e5, threatening on c6. So when they take, you give check, they go bishop d7, and you play beautiful move queen b7. For example, I had this move prepared like many years ago. What's the point of this? Believe it or not, you just want to take the stupid pawn. I mean, seemingly stupid, but of course, it's going to be a great thing if you take the pawn on a6. It's not one of those positions where you have like a very safe type of advantage. No, you just go into a completely crazy position. You just want to win the pawn. And let me just show you. Any rook b8, you just take the pawn. So don't even hesitate to do it. A game between two GMs went queen b7, and this guy played e6. Game between two GMs. So let me just show you. This guy captured an a6, brought the queen back on f3, and queen a5. Looks like black got some sort of compensation because he attacks the bishop, and he's gonna go with tempo with the bishop before. White played bishop c4, played bishop d2, played queen g3, threatening both. And after bishop c3, b takes c3, what can I say? White is up a pawn. Pawn structure is maybe broken, but who cares about that? White is clearly better in this position, and black certainly didn't have any compensation, what he was expecting out of his opening, and eventually white won. So just like you see, knight c6 is not enough for them because of this forced sequence of moves. And now let me just show you probably the most important part of this lecture. It's when they play knight bd7 or e6. Here I covered it with e6, so all those flexible players, Scheveningen players, those who like to mix it up with some sort of like flexible structures and positions from Paulsen and Taimanov-Kahn positions, they're just gonna go with e6. How are we gonna play? Well, that's exactly the point of this queen on f3. It supports g4, and remember, that's our plan. And here I won't give you like so many games or whatever. I'm just gonna give you the most important ideas, and I'll show you my let's just call them my famous blitz tricks out of this opening. So when you play g4, they can play bishop e7 or knight c6. For example, any queen b6, which I previously mentioned, they threaten the knight. You always move the knight back. What's the point? Then you have an easy g5 with tempo, and then you have an easy bishop e3 with tempo followed by long castle. But believe it or not, I don't make this bishop e3, even though you can do it, followed by long castle, move the queen, play h4, and push these pawns. I won, for example, a couple of games. I beat an IM Djukic from my city like this, but that's not a point. The point is to play bishop f4. Why? Because I'm willing to make long castle and to put some pressure on the d6 pawn. One might say, so where's the pressure if they just play knight e5? You move your queen to g3 and they go queen c7. They move queen c7 so they can push b5. You play long castles, and now they play like this. You kind of force these players to put their knight on e5. Now you put the bishop back, and when you put it back, now the knight is going to be kicked away with tempo. So when they play bishop e7, f4, knight e7, crucial trick comes here. You're too slow. But that's how I used to play when I was younger. If you play h4, h5, g6, blah, blah, blah. But if you play f5, you're going to be way faster. Why? Simply, you threaten to... first of all, they can never play e5 because of knight e5. Second thing, they can never take because of knight e5. Third thing, they should put the knight back into the game. Well, if you do it, thank you so much. But now I'm going to have an upper hand with f6. This is the point of f5. So when they take, you take. You want to take? Be my guest, baby. Bishop takes b5. And now you can't take because now you've just weakened the d6 square. An old very well known tricky idea in the Scheveningen positions and Sicilian games. If they go bishop f8, okay, no big deal. You can barely breathe here. I'm gonna put my king into safety. You know my role from my Butcher the Sicilian course. In 99% of positions and cases, when you make the long castle, put the king on b1. In just maybe 1% of cases, it might be bad. In 99%, it's gonna be great. So put the king on b1, and if you don't know what to do, that's always gonna be a very useful one. After bishop b7, bishop e2, castles, boom, queen f2. Once again, this very annoying battery. Black put the knight back on d7. I played bishop h5. This is one of my games. Now my opponent had this rouser structure, and when he played knight c5, boom. What a great move, rook to d4 to support a4, to support doubling the rooks on the d file. Absolutely cramped position by black, and I'm willing to say this is almost completely winning for white. Queen b6 is basically bad. It moves and puts the queen in front of the pawn, gives you knight b3. Okay, at the same time it forces your knight to remove from the center, so it's not gonna have like an active attack in the center. But what can you do? You afterwards can push g5, h4. You can play bishop e3, but just like I showed you, you play g5 followed by bishop f4. I need to tell you about these queen c7 ideas. For example, lots of guys like to do queen c7. Well, you came on g4 with the pawn just to push g5, so don't hesitate to do it. You want to play bishop e3, so you can play long castle. They go b5 to play two things. Also, that's why they need the queen on c7. So any e5, they can oppose with bishop b7. They threaten b4. It's very dangerous and looks very annoying. You play a3 to stop b4. They go bishop b7. And guys, please don't forget about this. Is like a very important thing of this variation. Once the pawn stands on g5 and they play bishop b7 and kind of weaken this one, you go with a fantastic queen h3. It's so powerful. And you cannot even imagine how many games, probably 50 games, I won in the following fashion. Weaker guys who absolutely don't feel the, like the danger, they play knight c6 and I push g6. Guys, if you take, I'm gonna take and you fall apart. I can even take by queen, doesn't matter, but of course I'm gonna take by knight and include another knight and demolish you so bad. Another thing is, if you, for example, play a long castle, I'm just taking here, you're falling apart and you're lost. If you play, for example, lots of guys against me did something like, I don't know, let's just say they go, I don't know, knight f6. Then you take on f7, and when the queen takes f7, now you've just weakened the e6. They just have lots of problems. They have 3 pawn islands. The pawn structure is broken, and that's a very nice thing. And I want to show you one more trick. Lots of guys said, what is he trying to do? To take on e6, to take on f7. Let me defend it. Here, you once again can take and take on e6. So all things considered, they cannot do anything that smart. But considering this fact that they assume that we just go after the e6 and f7 pawns, lots of guys can play knight c5 and say, what is he trying to do? What is he gonna do? To take a stupid pawn, g takes h7? No, but I'm gonna take this one. So this is another trick to remember, and this is how you win the rook. It worked for me probably 20 times so far. It's a very nice one. They gotta take, and look at this, they can't stop queen promotion. Beautiful thing, and I like it so much. So remember, that always happens once the bishop goes on b7, weakens the e6 square, and then your queen naturally removes from this diagonal that is potentially dangerous. You place your queen on an ideal h3 square and support g6 threats. What else do I have to show? Yeah, h6. If they play h6, h6 basically is aimed against g5, but believe it or not, it kind of accelerates our action on the king side. when we play h4, and what else to do? Now g5 comes down with tempo. And it's another great benefit of having the queen on f3, because this time this queen on f3 just defends the rook. So that means, whether they play knight bd7 or knight c6, knight c6 you take, you push g5, you take because by queen because it was defended, and you always push g6. g6 is my favorite move. I always sack this pawn, I play bishop e3, long castle, and then I destroy them on the king or queen side, depends. It's just important to break their pawn structure. They go knight bd7, no big deal. I go g5, queen g2. Why queen g2? So my queen can defend the rook. So after h takes, knight fd7 with tempo, knight c6 or with tempo, and now bishop e3, I said, followed by long castle f5. But can you play g6? Of course you can, and that is another pretty common possibility in these positions. Finally, if h4 and they do h5, you always gotta take. They gotta take by rook or knight. You always play bishop g5. Sooner or later, you're gonna be threatening bishop f6, queen h5, knight bd7, long castles, queen e2. Why queen e2? Because I'm pretty much aware of the fact that they need to develop the light square bishop by playing b5. Then I want to oppose it with this bishop. And when they play bishop b7, boom. Let me just do a typical butcher, the Sicilian trick, jump with the knight on d5 and launch the attack. And all things considered, I just need to show you one more line here. If on g4 they play knight c6, by now you could have realized that we always get tempo when they jump with the knight on c6 by taking, playing g5, and playing bishop f4. Here I got my own novelty that I never revealed, just like I'm doing it now. It's queen g2. Why? What is so important about this queen g2? To defend the rook, which means when I play h4, h5, and g6, my queen is going to be defending this one. Another thing, why did I play actually bishop f4, is to, after bishop e7 castles, now I'm threatening this knight. Knight g6, now I get this tempo. So I'm going to go with f4, I'm going to go with h4, h5. They go e5, I go bishop c4. And when I go bishop c4, I get a full activity. You can't play d5, you can't touch anything, and I'm just gonna go with h4, h5. In the game was queen a5, h4, knight f4, captured, queen f3, and you should be much better. And now g5 is not weak, it's supported. You're gonna put the bishop back on b3 so they cannot attack you along the b file, and placing the rook would be pointless. Well, your knight goes back on e2 and you go after the f4 pawn, and you're so much better. I just want to show you one more trick. For example, lots of guys don't care and treat this like Keres attack. So they play bishop e7, they allow me to play g5 and bishop e3. I insist on bishop e3 and not on h4 here, just to give you an additional tactical trick. If they play bishop g5, you cannot even imagine how many, and how did I come up with this line? That's a funny thing. I blundered the pawn on g5 once in bullet game. My opponent captured, and in that desperation, because I probably blundered the most important piece, I said, let me just go with knight e6, and if he takes, I'm going to play queen h5. Turns out that I'm winning after knight e6. So after knight e5, I give check, I go queen g3, and looks like I am about to lose the knight. Well, I'm gonna lose it. Rook g1, you can't go king f8 because of queen h6, knight e5, and after this you play long castle. Yes, we're down a piece, but this one is weak. f4, f5 is threatened. King is weak. They're absolutely undeveloped in the back rank, and we should be more than happy with the look of this position. So just like you see all these positions and all these lines, and they can't take it. That's why, let's say they go and treat this position like Keres attack. They just play castles. Of course, you gotta defend it. Knight c6, you play long castles. Queen c7. I apologize. For example, I found a game between two Russian young GMs in Blitz in some official tournament, where this guy played queen g3, b5, h5, moved it back, finally broke here, And here he took on h7 and played bishop g2, rook dg1, came up with this and won the game. But wait a sec. I want to show you a couple of things here. First of all, after h4, where he defended the pawn on g5, knight c6, long castles, queen c7. I just want to show you a famous Michal Tal's idea in similar type of games. He missed g6. Take a look at this beautiful attacking pattern. If you take by f pawn, knight a6 and go home. Go home. Yes, my queen is hanging, but now I'm threatening your rook. You gotta move it somewhere. And now I'm just going to jump, play bishop c4, harass this rook on f3, and do like lots of nice tactical tricks. Another thing, after queen g3, b5, he once again missed g6. This time, if you play h takes g6, a famous way of going and penetrating faster by sacking one pawn and doing h5. And finally, in position where he played knight c2, knight e5, g6, and where he finally penetrated, he took on h7. I'm not a big fan of taking on h7, but of course, if you calculate that it works, you should be going with that. You should be going with this. Today I played one blitz game like this, where I sacked like this, and then you just take on g7, and then he won Chile. I made it my opponent. All things considered, queen f3 is a very surprising, old, tricky, tactical, opposite side castle variation. There are some very nice and typical tactical patterns that you should be familiar with here, and you should enjoy in these positions. From my own experience, it worked in active time controls, which means bullet, blitz, and rapid. It worked with more than 73% of wins for white. I believe that I don't play only against batters, but also against IMs and GMs most of the time. So basically, if I'm telling you that it's good and that you should take a look at it and that you should consider this variation for your future, then definitely do it. Hope you enjoyed in the lecture, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.